going down from that point to Bradley Pond is pretty straightforward. And actually, it's really quite nice. You walk next to this huge, huge ledge of this cliff that is beautiful. It's one of those classic Adirondack pictures where you're like, oh, I'm this small person next to this massive stone cliff and this cliff face, and it's awesome. You take it in, even when you're in a situation like this where the worry of what's happening at home and the knowledge that, yes, the Rangers are probably going to be called based off of the emergency plan, you still can take a moment and appreciate the beauty and impressiveness of what you're walking through. So, it was nice. It was a fairly pleasant walk down. There's a few rock scrambles that you kind of go down on your butt on purpose because, you don't want to actually fall down those is bad news.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it was cool. Again, this situation, I was leading the way, going a bit faster than Mark and Dave. I had a little more skin in the game at this point, I think, because I knew the emergency plan was going to get enacted. And so we got to the junction with the Blue Trail, which is very close to the Bradley Pond lean-to.
Seeing that must have felt like, just like a ray of sunshine when you saw that trail.
Oh, it was an adrenaline boost. It was huge.
Totally. A big pick-me-up.
Yeah, very, very good news to see those blue trail markers again. But we were at a junction, so the rule is we stop and we wait for our hiking partners. So I waited. The guys got to me, and while I was waiting, I kind of devised a plan, and I was hoping the guys would go with it. And they did. So what happened was, because I was moving at a faster pace and I was re-energized by the fact that we were on the Blue Trail, I knew that the Rangers were going to be called just based off of the time of day. It was already like 6:45 or 7 o'clock at that point. I told the guys, listen, I'm going to go ahead and I will stop every mile or so and wait for a few minutes for you and then keep going, because I knew the Rangers were to come out, and I did not want the Rangers going up and down mountains looking for us unnecessarily.
Totally. That's a very good observation on your part, and props to you for that understanding.
Yeah. I mean, there could be a situation where those guys are really needed elsewhere. I don't want them wasting their energy and time on us when we're fine. We're just slow old guys. So they were cool with that. They understood, and that's what we did. They were keeping pretty decent pace. So when I would get to about a mile, I would wait, and I would see them, kind of give a wave, ask them if they're okay, cool, all right, and then I would go another mile. And that was the way the entire trip on the Blue Trail out. What we did was, when I got to that dilapidated bridge that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I climbed down, climbed back up, and that was about, I don't know, I think it was probably 8:30 at that point, maybe. So I had gone, doing some quick calculation, probably 2 miles, 3 miles in that hour and 15 minutes, while also waiting for the guys. So I was moving at a pretty good clip.
Yeah, you guys were booking it out of that point. You're like, I've been on this mountain for over 24 hours. I'm going home right now. Goodbye.
Exactly. So I climb up the small ravine out of the brook where that busted bridge was, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to wait for the guys just to see them and make sure they get through this thing okay as well. Sure enough, I look up and I see a New York State Ranger walking down the trail towards us. And instead of a wave or a hello, it was great. The Ranger greeted me by saying, "Are you the guys I'm looking for?"
Straight to the point. There's no beating around the bush with you right now.
Yep. And that's perfect. I have no problem with that. I like that direct approach.
Same.
So yes, I explained to him that, yes, my name is Jay Morrison. I'm with Mark and I'm with Dave. And I explained the whole situation, kind of more or less what I'm talking to you about tonight, in a condensed version, because he doesn't necessarily care about all the other details. But when I told him where we got mixed up, he had indicated that a lot of people get mixed up right there, especially in the dark, and that we had definitely made the right choice. So it's
Great.
Really, it's comforting to know that even in a harried state of mind, collectively, Dave, Mark, and myself were able to make the right choice and kind of get through the whole situation without any real negative consequences. The ranger was very cool. I really wish I remembered his name. Unfortunately, I was completely exhausted at that point, and I know he told me it. I just did not remember it. But he had radioed back to his crew. Apparently, there were 2 other rangers out with him. One had come in from the Bradley Pond lean-to area and was going to go up Panther Brook, and the third was actually coming in from a side trail that the rangers use, and he was almost to the point where he was going to start hiking up the express to look for us, and they were going to kind of figure out where we were. So thankfully we caught him in time, and the other 2 rangers didn't have to do any unnecessary hiking. They were able to meet back up and be fine without any real issue there.
Awesome.
Which is good. So the guys caught up to us. It was really funny because at this point the dogs were completely off leash. There was no need to keep them on leash because they were walking right next to us.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I remember Dave being very concerned. The rangers ahead of us, and the 3 of us are walking. And he goes, "Do you think I'm going to get a ticket for having the dogs off leash?"
That's funny.
It was very funny. I told him, "No, you're not going to ticket." What's interesting is the Western High Peaks in 2017 did not have the regulation where you have to have your dog on all the time. So the Santanonis being in the Western High Peaks, it was not even an issue. But I would like to believe that the Rangers would have kind of let that one slide in the event anyway. Maybe we were not being jerks. We were not being willfully ignorant. It was just an unfortunate circumstance for the trip.
Totally.
But you never know, I guess, right? So we got back together and we're walking out, and it was about maybe 0.3 of a mile from the gravel road where I actually met up with the ranger, where we kind of got collected. And so we walked out, reached the gravel road, and his truck is right there. And, I think the ranger looked at us and said, "Okay, guys, maybe you guys want to ride?" So, I think we kind of took stock and said, it's probably a good idea. So,
definitely. At that point, 100%.
Yep. So the ranger was cool. He offered the ride, but he said, "Don't get in my truck yet." He laid down some pads because we were wet and muddy, and the dogs were wet and muddy, and he did not want the inside of his truck getting messy. Totally respect that. It was an interesting. I chuckled about it at the time, right? I'm like, that's really funny. So the guys were getting into the truck, and they got into the back, and I was going to get into the front. The ranger stopped me before I could get in the truck, gave me this really strange look. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Hey, did you ever get in trouble with the law before?" I said, "What? No way, man. That's not me. That's not how I ride. I have an embarrassingly squeaky clean record. I follow the rules. It's how it is. That's how it's always been. The cops don't know my name because they've never had to know my name type of situation, right?"
Sure.
So
sure.
It was just one of those really strange. So he was looking at me. He was telling me about, or he was pushing. He's like, "Are you sure? Were you involved in some drunken boating and belly flopping incident?"
Oh, that's.
I was baffled. I'm delirious at this point anyway, right? So I just start cracking up and explain, "No way, that's not me. I don't, that's not how I roll. I don't do any of that." And it was kind of a really funny way to end the entire event.
Yeah, definitely. And
it was
just
so,
from left field too. Like,
yep.
The last thing you're going to think about is him asking you if you were arrested for some drunken boating accident. Like, that's funny. You can't write that.
Yeah, it was hilarious. And I'm like, all right, that's the capstone. So, to end it all out, he drove us. I think it's about a 1.8 mile gravel road right there from that point to where the parking area is. Drove us down there, and we got out. Thanks to the Rangers profusely. They do an incredible job. And if you don't mind to take a little bit of a soapbox position here, there's not enough of them for the job they have to do. So the fact that they still do such an incredible thing for anybody in the park and any park, big kudos to the Rangers. I think they're incredible, and I really hope that they get everything that they need to adequately take care of the park and its residents and visitors. So
absolutely agree. And it really says something too when, the Rangers say, no, we don't want raises. We just need more people. Like that right there shows that they care about what they're doing. And, they need more help, and that's ultimately what's more important. So yeah, they do God's work, quite literally, those guys and gals.
Yep, exactly. So we thanked them. We got changed. We had some clothes in the truck because we knew we were going to be messy when we got back. So we changed into those clothes, and we made our way home at that point.
All right, and then you must have called your wife, I would imagine.
Yep. As soon as there was service, I was sending my wife text messages the entire time and calling her and just letting her know that we were safe and fine. What's very interesting is, and I still find this funny 3 years later, she was never worried about us being on the mountain. Not one iota of worry. Her biggest concern was that we were so tired when we drove home that we were in a ditch somewhere.
Yeah, sure. I could see that being the big worry, 100%, especially after that many hours. And there's a place where you just will not know. Yeah, I could imagine that being a huge worry on her end.
Yep, exactly. So, I was glad that the emergency plan worked, and I did spend a good amount of time the following week apologizing for causing unnecessary worry.
Yeah, I bet. That's incredible. Well, man, that's the story.
Then 1 week later, UPS dropped off my new Garmin InReach.
I love it. That's the same thing I'm using as well. The InReach Explorer Plus. Great GPS. Highly
incredible.
Recommend it. It's it's like $400. It is well worth it when it could easily save your life. And over time, man, it is just so worth having. Highly recommend it. That's the Garmin InReach Explorer Plus GPS. So that's an incredible story, start to finish. And it seems like you guys made a lot of very good decisions, and then some. You didn't necessarily make bad decisions. It was more of just you weren't aware that something was probably not the right decision. Does that make sense? It's like it wasn't bad decisions, but it probably weren't. You probably should have been more aware of the time that stuff was taking, but it seems like when it came down to it and it was time to just call it and spend the night, everything was the right decision that you guys were doing, which is fantastic.
Yeah, yep, and that's accurate. Hindsight, there were a number of points in the day where I had stopped keeping track of pace and stopped paying attention to where we were and the time of day and how far from the car we were. Mm-hmm. And 3 years later, that is not something that I do anymore. I'm very cognizant of that. So you're 100% right. While we didn't make bad decisions, there was a couple of opportunities where we missed making the right decision.
Yes, I think that's perfectly worded. That's exactly what I'm feeling like as well. And a lot of times too, people tend to forget. It's like you could be in when you make kind of like the wrong decision in a sense, like in the moment, you might think like, oh no, I'm going to hit that last peak. It's only a mile away or it's only 2 miles